Kinshade Stories community, I'm glad you're here today because this one shook me. She walked into my office on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and the first thing I noticed was that she had been crying for a long time. Not recently. I mean, the kind of crying that leaves marks, the kind that hollows out your face and makes your eyes look like they belong to someone older. She sat down across from me, set her purse on the floor very carefully, like she was trying to control something, and then she said 6 words that I still hear sometimes when I'm sitting in that same chair at the end of a quiet day. She said, "I think I stole my own life." I didn't respond right away. In this work, you learn when to wait. She folded her hands in her lap and said it again, slower this time. "I think I stole someone else's life, and I don't know how to give it back." I had no idea in that moment just how literally she meant that. Before I go further, I want to be clear about something. Every case I share on this channel is real in the sense that it is drawn from genuine clinical experience, but details are always changed to protect privacy. Names, locations, identifying facts, all altered. Nothing I share here should be taken as a universal truth about families or relationships. Human beings are complicated. Situations are complicated. If anything you hear today connects to something you're living through, please reach out to a licensed professional. What worked for one person will not automatically work for another. Please keep that in mind as we go. Her name was Alina. She was 43 years old, originally from Indianapolis, though she had been living in the Pacific Northwest for nearly a decade. She was a landscape architect, married for 11 years to a man she described as steady and good. 2 kids, 8 and 11. From the outside, she said, everything looked like it was supposed to look. She had worked hard for that. She had wanted exactly that picture. And now she was sitting in my office telling me she had stolen it. The first time Elena came to see me, she said she had been having what she called episodes. Not panic attacks exactly, more like moments where she would be doing something completely ordinary, making dinner, driving the kids to school, sitting in a meeting at work, and she would feel an overwhelming sense that she was not supposed to be there. Not in a suicidal way, she was very clear about that. More like the feeling you get when you realize you have walked into the wrong room, that physical jolt of being out of place. It had been happening for about 8 months. It was getting worse. I asked her to tell me about her life, where she grew up, what her family looked like, the things she remembered from childhood. That is usually where I start. You build the foundation before you look at the cracks. Alina grew up in Indianapolis, middle of 3 children. Her father worked in insurance, her mother was a school administrator, stable household. Not warm, she said, but stable. She was the kind of kid who did everything right. Good grades, good behavior. She got a scholarship to a university in Oregon, which was how she ended up on the West Coast. She met her husband in graduate school. They built a life. She said all of this flatly, like she was reading from a document. I noticed that. When people narrate their own childhoods without any emotion attached, that is usually a signal. I asked her about her siblings. She paused. She had an older brother, Daniel, who she was close with growing up, and a younger sister named Ruth. She said the word Ruth and then stopped talking for a moment. I waited. She said, "Ruth and I don't speak anymore." I asked how long that had been. She said, "Since our mother died, 4 years ago." I asked what happened. She looked at the window, not at me, at the window. She said, "Ruth found something in our mother's house while we were cleaning it out after the funeral. She found a box." I asked what was in it. Alina's jaw tightened. Documents, letters, some photographs that didn't make sense at first, and then made too much sense. Over the next several sessions, Alina told me the full story, and I want to take you through it the way she took me through it, because the order matters. The way you learn something shapes what it does to you. The box Ruth found was in the back of a closet in her mother's bedroom, behind winter coats and old shoeboxes. It was a plain cardboard box sealed with packing tape that had gone yellow with age. Inside were hospital documents, a birth certificate, 2 handwritten letters, and 4 photographs of a baby that none of them recognized. Ruth had called Alina immediately. Elena drove to the house. They sat on the floor of their mother's bedroom and went through everything together. The birth certificate was for a girl, born in March of 1981 at a hospital in Indianapolis. The name on the certificate was Elena Marie Vasquez. Her mother's name was on it, but their father's name was not. In the space for the father, it said, unknown. Elena told me she read that and thought it was a mistake, a clerical error, something from the hospital. She was born in March of 1981. Her name was Elena, but her last name was not Vasquez. Her last name was her father's name, the man she had called Dad her entire life. She set the certificate down. Ruth picked up one of the letters. It was handwritten, addressed to their mother, dated June of 1981. Elena did not read it that day. She said she physically could not. Ruth read it aloud. Elena sat with her knees pulled to her chest and listened. The letter was from a woman named Gloria Vasquez. It was calm in tone, careful. It said that she understood the decision that had been made, that she respected it, but that she needed to ask, one final time, whether there was any possibility of being part of the child's life, even from a distance. She said she did not want to cause trouble. She said she just wanted to know that the baby was all right. Elena said the room went very quiet after Ruth finished reading. She said, "I asked Ruth, who is Gloria Vasquez?" Ruth said she didn't know. Elena said, and then Daniel called. He called right at that moment, and Ruth answered, and she told him what we had found, and he went silent for a very long time. And then he said, "Mom told me about this a long time ago. I didn't think it was my place to say anything." Elena stopped talking at that point in our session. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. Her eyes were dry. She had already cried all the tears she had for this part of the story. What was left was something harder than grief. It was the specific kind of pain that comes from realizing that your entire understanding of your own life has been built on information that was never entirely true. What Daniel told them, pieced together over several difficult conversations in the weeks after the funeral, was this. Their mother had been pregnant before she married their father. The pregnancy was not from their father. The relationship had ended and their mother had been left in a situation that in 1980 in Indianapolis was not easy to navigate. She had met their father shortly after. He knew she was pregnant. He agreed to raise the child as his own. The woman in the letter, Gloria Vasquez, was not a stranger. She was a sister, the biological father's sister, someone who had formed a connection with their mother during the pregnancy and had tried, after the birth, to maintain some kind of contact. Elena was that baby. She was not her father's biological daughter. She had known nothing about this. Her mother had taken the secret to her grave. Her brother had known for years and said nothing. And somewhere in Indianapolis, or somewhere in the world, there were people who shared her blood that she had never met and had never known existed. She looked at me and said, "Do you understand now what I meant when I said I stole my life?" I told her I was listening. She said, "The life I have, my husband, my kids, my career, my name, all of it was built on a version of myself that was never the whole truth. I walked into someone else's story and I made it mine, and I didn't even know I was doing it, but I did it. I benefited from it, from my dad believing I was his, from my mom protecting me from this, and now I don't know who I am without it. I don't know if the person I became was real, or if she was just the person they needed me to be." That was the moment I understood what the episodes were, the feeling of walking into the wrong room. It was not a symptom without a cause. Her nervous system had been carrying a weight she had no conscious access to. Her identity, the one she had constructed so deliberately over 43 years, had developed a fracture she couldn't locate because no one had ever handed her the map. She hadn't stolen her life, but she had been living inside a story that was built for her before she was old enough to choose it, and when the foundation of that story cracked open, the whole structure shook. Over the following months, we did a lot of work together, and I want to share some of what I explained to her because I think it speaks to something that more people carry than we realize. The first thing I explained to her was that what she was experiencing was a very specific form of identity disruption. It wasn't the same as a crisis of confidence or a midlife reckoning in the usual sense. This was something psychologists sometimes call a biographical rupture. It's what happens when the narrative you have built about who you are, the story that holds all the pieces of your life in a coherent order, suddenly cannot contain the information you've been given. The story breaks, and when it breaks, the self feels unstable. That is not a weakness, that is a completely normal response to an abnormal situation. I told her that what she felt in those episodes, that sense of being in the wrong room, was her mind trying to process a discontinuity it had never been prepared for. Her brain had one file for who she was. Now there was new information that didn't fit in that file, and until she could build a larger file, a new and more complete story about herself, her nervous system would keep sending those alerts. It was not dysfunction. It was her mind doing exactly what minds do when they need to integrate something they don't yet understand. We talked about attachment. Elena had formed her core sense of self in relationship to a father who loved her completely, who never in 43 years treated her as anything but her daughter. That was real. That love was real. The DNA was a biological fact, but the relationship was also a fact, and I reminded her that those two facts did not cancel each other out. Biology and belonging are not the same thing. Her father had chosen her every day of her life. That was not a small thing. That was not nothing. We also talked about grief, because beneath the identity disruption, there was genuine loss. She was grieving her mother, not just as the woman who died 4 years ago, but as the woman she thought she knew. She was grieving the version of herself she had been before October of that year. She was grieving the simplicity of a story that had never actually been simple. We talked about how grief doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like numbness. Sometimes it looks like anger that doesn't have a clear target. Sometimes it looks like those episodes, that low hum of wrongness that won't go away until you name what you're mourning. I also gently raised something that took Alina a long time to sit with, the question of Gloria Vasquez, the woman who had written that letter in 1981 asking if she could be part of a child's life. We didn't push toward any particular action, but we explored what it might mean to Alina to know that someone out there had asked about her, had wanted to be present, had been turned away not because she did anything wrong, but because the adults around her were doing the best they could with an impossible situation. Elena said, "I used to think my mother was perfect. I mean, not literally, but the way you think of parents when you're a kid. You think they have all the answers, that they made the right calls." She paused. I had to find a way to hold both things. My mother loved me, and my mother kept something from me that I had a right to know. Both of those things are true, and I'm still figuring out how to live with both of them at the same time. That is one of the hardest things human beings are asked to do, to hold someone in love and in disappointment simultaneously, to refuse the clean story where one feeling cancels out the other. It takes time, it takes work, but it is possible. By the time Elena's sessions with me came to a natural close, she had not resolved everything. She hadn't found Gloria Vasquez. She hadn't decided if she ever would. She had told her husband the full story, which had been its own painful and careful conversation. He had not flinched. She said that surprised her. She had expected it to destabilize something between them. Instead, she said, he just looked at her for a long time and then said, "You're still you. All of this is just more of you." She cried when she told me that. Real tears, the kind from the beginning, the ones that meant something was moving again. She was still you. All of this was just more of her. That is what I held on to after she left. There is something I want to leave you with today, and it is this.
So many of us carry family stories that were written before we arrived, stories about who we are, where we come from, what kind of people our families were and are. Most of those stories are incomplete. Some of them are quietly wrong, and when the truth breaks through, it can feel like the ground has shifted. But an incomplete story is not proof that your life was false. It is proof that you were human, inside a family of humans, all of them carrying more than they could say. The question I want to ask you today is this: have you ever had a moment where something you believed about your own family turned out to be more complicated than you knew? Not necessarily something this dramatic, maybe something smaller, a story that got revised, a secret that came out late, a version of events that didn't quite match what you were told. How did you find a way to carry both what you knew and what you learned? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. This conversation matters. And if this story moved you at all, please give it a like and consider subscribing to Kinshade Stories, because this community is built on exactly these kinds of honest, human conversations, and every new person who joins it makes it stronger. Thank you for being here today. I'll see you in the next one.